posting. Can you verify that it was properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much. We're now at the point in the agenda where there is an opportunity for citizens to speak. I understand we have one speaker tonight, is that correct? All right, very good. Because there are less than 6 speakers, speakers will be notified at 3 minutes, but allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any appropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this board committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be cleared during public comments. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our first and only speaker tonight will be Paul Reese. Welcome, Paul.
Good evening. I came tonight because last month Diane brought up turning sick days into personal days for some reason. I've been coming here a long time and I've heard some bad ideas. This is about marks towards the top. Sick days to go vote was one of the reasons she gave. I'm like, I thought, what is this, 2008? How many days do you need to vote, or how many times do you plan on voting? I mean, sick days to go vote. You want to take a personal day to do that. To go drive a fire truck is another thing, or be an EMT. Well, I take a job to be a machinist. I have customers that need to do it. My job requires me and expects me to show up for do said job because it's important to some people that I do my job. So I thought we care about students here. I thought that's our priority, to care about students. But apparently to drive a fire truck is more important. If you live in a community that doesn't have a full-time fire department and you don't pay the taxes, it's going to take a little longer for them to arrive. And that's part of the plus and minus of living in a community that doesn't. The fact that you would think that you need personal days, you know, I guarantee you get almost 2 weeks off. And it's probably around 9 days that the Waukesha gives off for sick days and a personal day. And you get 3 months off in the summer to get stuff done. You can't figure out to get done in 3 months. We'll give you a couple weeks for Christmas, and we'll give you another week for spring break. And then I guarantee you, I almost can guarantee you don't string 4 weeks together without a day off. So to propose that we need personal days to do this is actually the best argument Diane made was that we give too many sick days. She said she accumulated a lot of sick days. How many teachers are accumulating a lot of sick days? Why are they given so many sick days that they can accumulate? Because they're not here that often. Why are they given 2 weeks? I mean, her best argument was that we give out too many sick days. That was her best argument, the best point that she made. So why aren't we looking at removing a sick day or two? Because apparently we give too many up. If all the teachers are banking sick days because they're not going through them, then why are we giving them up? Why are we giving sick days at one point of your career where we're paying you one rate and then paying you out at the end of your career at a different rate for those same sick days? You know, this isn't financially sound for a district to run that way. A private company would not run that way. My company would not run that way. I get 15 days a year to use if I'm sick or to go and take off to do what I want to do. 15 days a year. I get a day for Christmas, a day for New Year's. I get probably another 5 days a year for other things. That's what I get. But I have a job and I need to do it. They expect me to show up and do my job because we have customers and we want to keep people happy. And we have customers and they're called students. And I thought that was the priority around here. But sometimes I think wrong. Thanks.
Right. With no other public speakers, we can move into item C of the agenda, which is approval of the minutes from our May 6th meeting. Yes, Dan?
I so move.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Borowski. Any discussion? If not, I would ask for all of those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes 5-0. All right, we have no policy discussion items today under agenda item D, so we'll move into policy action items. First on the agenda is policy 7250.01, memorials for staff and students. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. Welcome, everyone, tonight. So we'll see if the third time perhaps is the charm, and if it isn't, that's okay too. This has been a good discussion we've had for a couple of months on this new policy, and I tried to take the ideas that I heard from the committee last month, Julie and I did, and we tried to build those into this newest edition. So some of the things that we talked about last time was having the school site council or building leadership team approval first. So we worked that in. Some of the other things we talked about last time were having the board have an additional opportunity beyond the board president and superintendent potentially agreeing on it. That was where it stopped the last time. So what we did is change it to say permanent memorials, and that's the key, right? So we're talking about memorials that are statues or something like that that can't be moved, are permissible only after a proposal is first approved by the school site council or building leadership team, and then subsequently by the board superintendent, I should say just superintendent, after consultation with the board president. And so envision that we talk, the school site council brings it, Darren and I meet with them, I bring it, I talk with the board president, we feel it's a good idea, we inform the rest of the board, and then any board member still reserves the right to request review and approval by the F&F committee, since it would be a facility project, as a final step before implementation. So if any board member had concerns after we went through the first steps, we could then go to F&F and discuss it, and then ultimately that committee would need to approve it before it could move forward. So that was the way we tried to, Mr. Wad was helpful in this discussion to try to bring all of those considerations together. But based on what we have here, any questions that anyone has or suggestions?
I just have a question. I guess, how do you envision the communication between the superintendent and the board being? Just like in an email, or would this be at a board meeting, or how would that?
I kind of envisioned it would probably be like when one of our updates, like the board president and I
Sure. The Friday
looked at
updates?
this, yes, and maybe we'd have a picture of it, a description of it, what it would be, what school, where it would be, would it go through the steps that we had taken to date, and then you would, as a board, any of the board members have the ability to reach out to the board president or myself to say, I have some questions about that, I'd like to see that go to the next F&F, and then we would take it there.
Okay, so the communication back to the site committee or building leadership would not occur until maybe, I don't know, we were given a week or something, some kind of short time frame
Yes.
to, I guess, object, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, probably the easiest way would just be to get through the next F&F meeting cycle, right? And then
Gotcha.
once you're past that, then they have permission to move ahead, assuming nobody raised the question.
Okay,
Yeah, good questions.
And then how would you announce it, like, to the community that it's been done? You know, like, just in terms of, you know, I think there'd be some, like, in your superintendent's report or something.
Oh, sure.
okay, To make that formal,
Yeah, that's
know,
a nice idea, and we could
in
kind of,
recognition of the fact that this is a memorial that's going to be, you know, implemented.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Mrs. Voigt. We could certainly do that in my report.
Any other questions for Dr. Siebert? Comments that anyone would like to add? Mr. Moore?
No, I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for this. I think you laid it out very thoroughly. Thank you to Mr. Watt. If he, I know you mentioned him collaborating with you. I think you're right. Third time is a charm. I think I think you made it so detailed where I don't have any questions right now. Good work to you.
Oh, thank you. Now, and your suggestion last time about having additional board input is to try to be built in here. And like you said, we can always, the nice thing about policies is you can always bring them back, right, if we want to talk about it.
I noticed that. I noticed how you tried to keep the peace with everybody's opinions.
bet.
You weaved it all together. It made it perfect. So thank you.
Well, good, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I would be entertaining a motion for approval.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Borowski.
A second?
Seconded by Mrs. Voigt. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, moving on. Next on the agenda is policy 7544, use of social media. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. So this is a new policy for us, and I'll try to summarize it, kind of walking down. It's a relatively lengthy policy. The third paragraph, superintendent is charged with designating district-approved social media platforms and sites which are listed on the district's website. We already have that, so we use Facebook, Twitter, or now known as X, and Instagram. Next paragraph talks about it's critical that students be taught how to use social media platforms safely and responsibly. That happens in the schools. District recognizes employees may use social media for personal as well as professional reasons, and the district neither encourages nor discourages employees' use of social media for personal purposes, and the district regulates employees' use of social media for purposes related to their district employment to the same extent it regulates any form of employee communication in that regard. We drop down to the fifth paragraph. That's a longer one, but it talks about how we use the social media in terms of a limited public forum. So we're certainly not replying to everything, but if somebody says, well, what's the time of the graduation at North, we would respond that it's at 1 p.m. But if somebody, makes a disparaging comment, we certainly probably wouldn't respond to that and haven't. It follows up with saying employees in administrative positions ordinarily are not permitted to post personal comments on matters of general public interest because to do so could be misconstrued as board-sponsored speech. And it also finishes by saying staff members are prohibited from using district-approved social media to campaign on behalf of any political issue or candidate for local, state, or national office. That borrows language from policy 3231, which is outside activities of staff, which refers to that in the school buildings. Diane, Mrs. Voigt.
Do you want to discuss as we go or wait till the end?
We can discuss if you like, sure.
One of the statements there.
Your microphone is not on.
One of the statements there, it says employees' personal posts on the public platforms site are limited, restricted matters of general public interest that are not related to the employee's specific employment and wholly unrelated to the employee's job responsibilities. So my question is, if you wanted to comment on something your students have done, like a great fundraiser for the food pantry, you're not supposed to be able to do that because it's related to your specific employment, et cetera.
We get to a point later that, where we talk about, it is, let's see here. It's under social media for instruction in school-sponsored activities. So it says, employees are prohibited from using personal social media accounts to communicate or otherwise connect or interact with students for any purpose that is not related to instructional or school-sponsored activities. So what that is trying to outline is that we do want, like, a high school Facebook page or Twitter page or a high school sports page to be able to communicate things about activities. We just don't want personal communication from staff member to student that could be non-related to school or an extracurricular. So I think we're trying to get there, but if there's something in that paragraph we can certainly come back to it, to Mrs. Voigt, if there's something you'd like to see different in that fourth paragraph overall, or fifth.
I'm just, this is a brand-new policy.
Yeah, it is brand
You know,
new.
and I'm thinking like
There's a
all
lot
the
to
teachers
think
that
about. You bet.
will be having to live underneath this policy aren't even around to be able to look at it and be able to have you know, have any feedback about it if we would approve it tonight per se. But just as I read that statement, it's like, as a coach, I couldn't talk about, the team and how we're going and how we're going to state and some of those sorts of things, because technically that's saying, no, you couldn't be able to be proud about that, those kinds of great things that are going on, with your students.
So if I can clarify, I don't think we've gotten there yet, but if you turn to the next page, the first paragraph talks about social media for instructional and school-sponsored activities. Staff may, with prior approval, authorization from the principal, use social media platform sites for communications about classroom instruction or school-sponsored activity, as well as to support classroom instruction. So I think that's where it's spelled out specifically that it can be used for those purposes. I think it's just that the staff member needs to have it authorized that they can, and I guess I'll ask on that. I mean, I wouldn't assume that's on a post-by-post basis, but rather, let's say the baseball coach at West just gets clearance that I can post about the outcomes of my baseball games, my team's baseball games, success at practices, fundraisers, right? They wouldn't have to get each post approved, would they?
No. It talks about that staff, including district-approved volunteers, may, with prior approval from the principal, use social media for those purposes. So it's more like a one-time, like, I want to create this
Yeah.
golf high school page. Mr. Moore?
Does that help at all, Mrs. White?
I think there's a lot of things that, because social media is so prevalent in, what's happening in our schools and the communication about things that are going on, I'm concerned that it's not worded such a way that, like, you're going to get in trouble for saying congratulations to the kids who just graduated from the school, or going, just got the scholarships at an honors night or something like that.
Sure.
Mrs. White, can you tell me again which paragraph or part of a paragraph you're concerned about?
Yeah, what statement?
It was paragraph 6. I think you called it paragraph 5, but
The really long one?
the really long one.
First page. But which part?
Just the statement that employees' personal posts on the public platforms site are limited, restricted matters of general public interest that are not related to the employee's specific employment and wholly unrelated to the employee's jobs responsibilities. So it's basically, it makes it sound like you can't talk about anything good that's going on in your classroom or in your sports.
Well, I wonder, though, it's interesting point you're making. I wonder, though, if what they would be commenting on could be considered matters of general public interest. So maybe that makes it okay then.
And that's referring specifically to employees' personal posts on public
Right.
platforms
Right.
But so I
versus district-sponsored ones.
yeah, I think I do see your point, Mrs. White. The part that says it must be wholly unrelated to the employee's job responsibilities. So if the coach of the North Gulf team wanted to call out as a matter of just his personal pride or to make his followers there aware of the success of his team, this might imply that he's prohibited because it would be part of his specific job responsibilities.
Okay.
Right.
We may want to look at,
Yeah, we can certainly look at how we could make that better.
I hate to have somebody like Coach Knut get in trouble for
Yeah.
doing something like that, because it is obviously totally related to his job responsibilities as a coach.
Right.
I think
yeah.
that's a fair call out. Thank you, Mrs. White. Mr. Moore?
That's what I was gonna say. Thank you, Mr. Watt. I think just discernment. Knowing, we all know what, if a teacher is saying congratulations, like Ms. Voigt said, that's a fair call. I mean, that's not inappropriate. That's not inappropriate, and it's not, we all know that, that's okay. Like, congratulations, or yes, we had 5 wins this year. We made it to a state championship. I'm pretty sure the public view will see that, okay, what's wrong with that.
Right.
I think my understanding is I interpreted it maybe a different way in terms of the other part, like you said, talking to students directly about other things could be misconstrued when you said that. Maybe stuff that's not related to school or things like that. That's the way I interpreted when you said it. So I get what I understand what you were saying, basically.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So
There's maybe a way we can write it better.
Right, right, and I understand what Ms. Voigt was saying too. So I was like, okay, I think it's just a word language, but I did understand what you were saying in terms of, teachers should know better in terms of like not, discussing personal things with students. But on the other side, what like Ms. Voigt was saying, there's nothing wrong with a teacher saying, congratulations to the class of 2024, or, on Facebook or Twitter, whatever the thing is, or we did it, y'all, we graduated, 100% success rate, or we made it to state championships. Versus, yeah, me and my family went here for dinner last night, or, things like that.
Sure.
That's kind of, crossing the fine line right there. So both of you are right in a way.
I think so too.
The wording. So that's why I started with saying discernment and stuff, understanding, the context of how you're saying it. So.
Yeah, you bet.
Mr. Brooks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I kind of go back to that phrase that Mr. Borowski had pointed out, which was the matters of general public interest. I think saying something, congratulating a class or congratulating a team on their accomplishments, that would be general public interest. Whereas like speaking about your role as an educator or support staff or building staff, and then singling out a student or talking about a specific scenario in your class while naming students, like that's obviously vastly different. It would be considered more of a, kind of in what we're trying to avoid in that language. So I do think trying to clarify some of this language so that we're not making staff feel like they can't celebrate accomplishments of their classrooms. I mean, I think, not that everybody would necessarily read it that way, but I think it's good to clarify that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Brooks. I appreciate that.
No, I did see here about classroom instruction being used, social media being a platform for that. I'm just kind of guessing, like, in what capacity, because we have, we live in a technology, based world now, and I know, technology is ever changing, I understand that. But majority of instruction online, teachers use Google Classroom or Blackboard or Moodle and things like that. In what context, I guess, with instruction, and maybe it's to solve a math problem, I don't know, but I've never done that, but I'm just asking in what context, when I looked at it, it's like classroom instruction, on social media. Can you give an example of what you mean by that? I've never done it.
It's a good question, absolutely. So in the student handbooks, there's the kids sign off and parents sign off on the student acceptable use policy. So it gets referenced there, and it gets gone through by the homeroom teacher, if you will. Then when they go through the handbook, they talk about use of social media and use of that. And then I think it's also covered in, I just can't think of the term that it's called, but it's essentially like technological safety, or as part of some of the counseling work or some of the social emotional type pieces. There's a word for it. I just can't think of what it's called. It's like digital citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Yes, that whole concept it's taught through those types of pieces. But we can get more clarity on that too. Absolutely.
Mr. Borowski.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I appreciate you wanting to get more clarity, but I don't know that we need it. I mean, we're just talking about, for instructional purposes, I think being more general in this case, it's probably a rare case, is better than being more specific. Yeah, you want an example just for conversation purposes, but I don't know that we need to write it into
Sure.
the
Okay.
policy. Okay.
Oh, that's good. All right, so why don't we just we can go high level through a few more pieces here, and then ultimately we'll take this back, but we'll see if there's anything else that you'd like to reconsider. I'm on the second page now, or on the back, but you're on a computer potentially. The social media for instructional and school-sponsored activities. The last sentence, students are prohibited from posting or releasing personally identifiable information about students, employees, and volunteers through district-approved social media without appropriate consent. And employees, I read this earlier, are prohibited from using personal social media accounts to communicate or otherwise connect or interact with students for any purpose that is not related to instructional or school-sponsored activities. We can then go down to expected standards of conduct on district-approved social media. Employees who access district-approved social media platforms are expected to conduct themselves in a respectful, courteous, and professional manner. Students, parents, and members of the general public who access district-approved social media platforms are similarly expected to conduct themselves in a respectful, courteous, and civil manner. Talks about they shall not be obscene, vulgar, lewd, etc. The district may exercise editorial control over the style and content of student speech on district-approved social media if reasonably related to legitimate pedagogical concerns, pedagogical, I should say. Staff and students who post prohibited content shall be subject to appropriate disciplinary action. Mrs. Voigt.
And what would fit in that category? You know, like, what would say someone wrote a disrespectful email response? What would you see as the appropriate disciplinary action for that type of, communication?
Well, this wouldn't be an email. This would be some kind, but I know what you're saying. This would be some kind of like social media post.
Right.
So something that somebody put on a district-approved account. So somebody would hack into the district-approved account and post, "We're having a snow day," or something like that as an example, right? So that would obviously be, there would be, depending on what the offense was, there'd be some kind of disciplinary action that would be administered. It would kind of depend, it'd be case dependent, I think. But it would be more like they got into some district-approved one and made something fictitious.
Do we in any policy lay out what the disciplinary measures would be for violation? Is that specifically spelled out anywhere else?
In terms of like social media violations?
No, just generally speaking. So Mrs. Voigt asked what specifically would be the potential disciplinary action, right? I guess what I'm wondering is if we ever, like, in other policy, spell out what the potential disciplinary actions would be, or I would assume most policy I see here or elsewhere just specific says disciplinary potential or appropriate disciplinary action.
Up to and
which is-
including, up to it, and potentially including expulsion is generally what it
Yes,
says.
if that's the
Or
case,
termination,
and you then take each case on a case-by-case basis, looking at mitigating and aggravating circumstances and try to
Absolutely.
decide what's appropriate, given
Right.
the,
Yeah, given the offense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's generally progressive in nature.
okay.
Retention of public or student records. So remember, we approved a public records policy a couple meetings ago. So we keep everything now for 7 years. We do have some software that monitors and stores our district social media, so we're protected there. And then we finish with employees' use of district technology resources to access social media for personal use. And so it says, employees and district-approved volunteers are prohibited from using district technology resources to access social media for personal use, and that they're reminded that the district may monitor their use of district technology resources. And then it also says, secondarily, that employees are permitted to use personal communication devices to access social media for personal use during breaks and meal times. So it's like you can't use the district computer, but you can use your cell phone during breaks and meal times to check your own personal stuff, is the way it's written, or your iPad, your district iPad. I'm sorry, Mrs. Voigt, go ahead.
So basically, a teacher's not supposed to use the computer that's given to them, like that to use for grading and for, attendance reporting, et cetera, to do any social media checking.
For personal use. They could be doing it for their school-sponsored activity. So the football team, the high school page, the whatever, that can be, the district resources can be used for those things. That's referring to them using district devices for personal use, personal social media. But it does say then secondarily that during breaks and meal times, they can use their own personal communication devices, most likely a cell phone, to check Facebook during their lunch period or Facebook during their prep period, for example, on a personal level. And it really, I think it's a fair balance because it recognizes that, you know, a lot of people do communicate via those social media sites. So to allow people to do that with their own device on their own time during the school day is, I thought it would be fine.
Mr.
Yes.
Moore?
I understand that, because you don't want to cross both things together, especially as a professional. You don't want to cross both things together as a professional. So like you said, it is fair. And I do appreciate, I do appreciate how you said, they can use it on their cell phone or prep time or lunchtime, whatever. That's their own personal time, whatever, and that's their own personal device. And also, the school computer, you don't know who's looking at it, and you don't know who is maybe monitoring it either. So I do appreciate keeping those things separate, like you said, so that, there's no things don't get misconstrued or, things don't get, also to protect the teacher as well. We're trying to help them so that their personal information does not get, to help them protect their own personal information as well so that it doesn't get exposed or
Yeah, you bet.
things like that, especially on a school device.
No, thank you, Mr. Moore. I think some of the questions that we have are very good ones, and I think some of the challenging parts is trying to delineate between the personal use and the district-approved use, right? And so that's maybe what we can, in some of the questions that you've had, we can try to make that a little bit more clear before we bring it back. It's a substantially long policy, and we understood we're going to have to go through some questions, and that's absolutely fine, because I think ultimately we make things better when we talk through them and then bring it back.
Just one more question. Are they going to have, I know that teachers have to come back for professional development before school starts, and that's when typically a week before school or 2 weeks before school starts, and that's typically where they get all this information in terms of updates and things like that. This will be included in at least going an overview, even for new teachers coming to the district, on understanding the differences and stuff like that, so that they are aware, so nobody's caught off guard with, the differences between the personal, social media platforms and the district-wide social media platforms and the usage of both of them. Would that be included in PD or?
Well, it would be probably, assuming we get this approved, I mean, social media is mentioned in multiple other district policies that we have already, so it's already talked about somewhat, but assuming this was approved, this would be something we could have principals certainly talk through, and those of you, Mr. Moore and Mrs. Voigt, you know how those opening staff meetings go, when you sit and you get lots and lots and lots of information. Mr. Brooks, you too. So it'd probably be something we could do in one of those as part of an ongoing session of, updated policies and updated information that we share with them every year when they come back.
Mr. Borowski?
Yeah. I don't know that this is the same question, but maybe it's similar. Because one of the things that struck me as I'm reading this is there's a lot of things that, as a teacher, I would want to know. I guess, what is our process in general? This is for either new policies like this or any updated policies that would impact teachers on their job, whether it's in a classroom or not, for updating them on, or communicating that to them. That's, I guess, part one of the question. And then part two is, does the district do anything to, or do the teachers have to do anything to acknowledge, like, receipt of that communication or updates on whatever policies? So two-part question. I guess.
Generally speaking, you send them, Julie sends, once we get them approved through Neola. So once you approve them, then they go to Neola. Takes a while to get them officially approved and into board docs. And then we alert the principals that we have updated policies on whatever front. They do sign off on an acceptable use policy.
Okay.
Staff members do, just like students do. So there are pieces in there that are ongoing. But, yeah, I mean, not necessarily like is every policy, a lot of the policies that we do don't always impact employees either, but to the ones that do, the expectation is that the principals are making staff aware of those.
Okay, so somewhat on, from what I'm hearing, somewhat it's principal discretion on which ones they're going to communicate that they think are necessary, maybe, or important enough, if you will.
Sure.
Okay.
So Dr. Siebert, if I could kind of follow up on that. The impression that I'm getting here from reading this, or at least that I had coming in, was that a lot of this is already the way social media policy is expected. But it's scattered around in multiple different policies, or maybe it's just general expectations that are communicated. And there isn't a central location that if someone wanted to know, like, what our policy is around social media usage, so they can come here, and then this sort of has all the pointers out to the other policy that may specifically deal with particular issues related to social media, whether that's student-related or, I'd need to go back and look. But is that fair, or is there truly things new in here that teachers, staff, or students, for that matter, may find changes the way that they understand policy or expectations today?
I think it's essentially both. I think it is putting it all in one place, because it is mentioned, and there are various policies referenced within this new policy of where it is, and it's in even more places. But then secondarily, I think it's providing more clarity on, I don't know how I would say it. I mean, I think it's more clarity around what is and isn't expected, if you will, than maybe we currently have in some of the other
Okay.
chunks of policies.
Mrs. White?
Closely related to your thought is the idea that how is this different from the technology acceptable use policy that everybody does have to sign as a student, as a staff member at some point? And that is one that has to be signed off on. And, I would think that anything that's pertinent should be included in that, where you are saying, this is important for you to read this, this is something you have to live by, and especially a new policy. What's different in here than what's in the acceptable use policy that already exists is what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
We can get that, sure. Anything else anybody would like when we bring this back to consider?
Ms. White?
I guess you mentioned that there are several references, and there definitely are, with the technology acceptable use policy, et cetera. The only ones listed here are the Protecting Children in the 21st Century Act, and then Children's Internet Protection Act. Listed on the last page besides Neola. And usually there's, there are legal references or whatever that, that are more significant than just those two, because those seem relatively, like 2008, 2001. Yeah, I would think that there's other things that might be even more current than that.
Sure.
That's pretty long ago,
I assume those references come from Neola?
Yes.
Do we, I can't remember, do we typically also identify related or other district policy that pertains?
There's a few that are referenced inside there, the Student Code of Conduct, school-sponsored student publications, student technology acceptable use and safety, but they're right in the actual policy as opposed to listed at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, but to answer, or try to answer your question, Mr. Watt, I do recollect other policies that I think
That's
policies
kind of my recollection. I'm just
listed
wondering
at
if
the end as sort of references.
maybe put them in both places, just so that we have.
Yeah. List them at the end, yeah.
Sure.
Because they do, they reference the word technology, student technology acceptable use policy in paragraph 4, Seaboard Policy 754.0.03. But, I think that they have that cross-reference at the end as well,
Sure.
Yeah.
Do that. Yeah, good suggestion. Nice. All right.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Ms. Brooks?
Yeah, just a quick clarification, just to make sure that I am understanding this correctly. So specifically looking at the expected standards of conduct in district-approved social media section, but it's referenced multiple places. So when we're talking about a district-approved social media platform and expectations for, how staff conduct themselves on those, we're talking specifically about like school-sponsored pages. So like, the North Football High School page, or, if Mrs. Smith wants to have a Mrs. Smith's, fifth grade class page on there, like things that are specific school-related, not personal use.
Correct,
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
yes.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Dr. Stever.
Yeah, thank you all.
We'll look forward to that coming back to us with some of the potential revisions. Moving on to the next item, policy 8122, volunteers.
All right, so we are back to referencing Wisconsin Act 26 from 2023, which is referencing that as board members, you may serve as volunteer bus drivers, and that's the only addition that we're making to this volunteer policy. So we've had this addition to a couple other ones, and now it's making its way to the volunteer policy, and cross-referencing here conflict of interest, which we recently approved, which stated that if you wanted to drive a bus, that it would not be considered a conflict of interest.
Mrs. White.
When, like 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth and sixth paragraphs talk about the sex offender registry. Is that what automatically happens when they bring their driver's license and do the sign-in at the, when they try to enter the building?
Through the Verkada?
Verkada.
Yes.
So is there some way to reference that this is going to be happening through that? It's not like you have to do some other, like, sex offender registry check when you walk into the building. That's going to be happening on site. Does that make sense?
It does, it does.
Because some of the other things, like for me to be a volunteer through ERAS, I have to go through a background check and get this little permission thing that's good for 2 years and, renew it after that time period, et cetera, that this isn't something I have to do before I can come in and be a volunteer. This is going to happen when I hit the door, to try to get into the building.
To clarify, though,
Cl-
a volunteer wouldn't necessarily be entering a building, would they? If they were,
true.
say, an athletic assistant coach, they might only ever be out on the field, potentially.
But they would go through, then they would go through, Mr. Watt, a process through the Human Resources Department.
Right, so that's why I'm saying, I don't know that we necessarily want to assume that
Okay.
everyone
True.
would
Okay.
get caught through a Verkada onsite.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking it's probably better to be
Rod?
Broader,
there and
because,
just
yeah,
say, it's done, they shall be screened, and
right, because in the past, as an
Regardless of
example, to Mr. Borowski's point, we used a system called Raptor. So had we said Raptor, now we would have to change it to
Yep.
Verkada, right? Sometimes it's better to just know that it's happening in multiple ways and then
yeah.
leave it. Yeah. But it's a good point, Mrs. Voigt. I mean, there are multiple ways that we can check it.
Anyone have any other comments or questions about the volunteers policy, 8120? Mrs. Voigt.
I think it's interesting that it includes the second from the last paragraph, that the superintendent shall ensure that each volunteer is properly informed of the district's appreciation of his or her time and efforts in assisting the district. It seems like telling, that volunteers need to know that you've been told to say thank you
Sure.
for your services.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments? If not, I would actually be seeking a motion to approve policy 8120.
Go ahead.
You can go, you do it.
You do it.
I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Voigt, seconded by Mr. Moore. Any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Next is policy 8407, School Resource Officer Program. Dr. Siebert.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wad. So this one is actually really nice timing. It follows shortly after the Student Services presentation, the Roll Of series, which featured Brandon Ernst, the School Resource Officer at Waukesha North. This is a new Neola policy that is recommended for districts that have a School Resource Officer program, which I'm sure you feel the same as I do, that we're very proud here in the School District of Waukesha that we do. So it basically just outlines what school resource officers do within the schools, and reflecting back to Mr. Ernst's presentation, I remember him talking about almost all of the pieces that we mentioned here. And I think it's, if nothing else, it's, sometimes you can make, I think, you can make statements through policies, right? And by having a policy on school resource officers, you can signal that you value their presence in the schools, and that they're an important aspect and proponent of school safety, and helping students see that police officers are wonderful resources.
Just a question.
Yes, Ms.
This
White.
isn't a new policy. This was actually 2019?
Oh,
Or is this a new policy in our?
I think it's new for us.
It is new
Yes,
for
I think
us,
it's one that's been in the Neola other districts may have had it prior to us,
but this is new for us.
new for us.
Okay.
yes.
It's about time, I guess.
Yes, yes.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I just rewatched the previous meeting where we heard the role of the SRO, and just really incredible to hear all the great work that they're doing. I know there are other school districts that have kind of moved away from having student resource officers in the school. I'm grateful that we have them here, and that they are they're not just a police officer in the building, but they are a member of the school community, and that they're actually forging those relationships. I was really impressed with Brandon, especially talking about their experience with crisis prevention, trauma-informed care. I think that's something that we have a lot of students who experience various mental health crises and get dysregulated, and it can be jarring if you don't know how to deal with that. So making sure that we have people like that in our buildings who are trained and know how to deal with those very sensitive and sometimes volatile situations is very. I'm very thankful that we have that in our schools, because we are seeing more and more students who are facing that. And I think he said it best when he talked about how the problems that we face in our schools are often a microcosm of our community as a whole. And we know that there are folks like that in our Waukesha community as well. So, no, I think it's great that we're specifically creating and looking at policy to kind of acknowledge the role of the SRO officer, and I'm thankful that we have great people in our community who are willing to step up and serve in our schools and fill those important roles.
Oh, thank you.
Mrs. White.
Just a point of reference, look at the list of all the statutory references there. This isn't just a made-up job description. They have a pretty good handle on
Absolutely.
why they do what they do.
Good point, Mrs. Voigt.
So I want to echo something you said when you were introducing this, which is sometimes you adopt a policy to make a statement about who you are and what you value and what our principles are as a district. And to Mr. Brooks' point, there are districts that have been openly hostile to having SROs on their campus. And first of all, just as a parent in this district, I am proud of the fact that we have them, that they do the jobs that they do in the way that they do them. And I would be proud as a board member to adopt a policy that codifies that and tells everybody, we believe in the role of SROs to help make our schools safer places. But beyond that, places where we foster positive relationships between our students and law enforcement, and between law enforcement and our districts. So I am all for this, and I think this is an important policy, not just for what it lays out, but what it says that when we adopt it. Mr. Moore?
I agree.
Anyone else? Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Watt, and I think I mentioned at the full board meeting back in May, you know, for the districts that have moved away from this, they point to, you know, having police in the schools will form, you know, we'll just create a more hostile environment, and kids won't feel welcome. I mean, we know that when young people have positive interactions with law enforcement at a young age, that really shapes how they perceive law enforcement growing up. And so especially for those kids who are in maybe more vulnerable communities, it's really important to have people who are, again, not just bodies in the building, not just people who have a uniform on in the building, but people who are actually going out of their way to make a positive relationship with the kids. I think that just can completely have a significant impact on how they view and respect law enforcement growing up and how they interact with them. So yeah, I'm grateful that we are taking up this policy tonight so that we can show our appreciation as a district for SROs and our commitment to keeping our schools safe.
And if I could just add, I would say the flip side is also true that, you know, every time I tour a school and talk to an SRO, they love the job. Getting to know students and seeing them and understanding them a little bit more, you know, that just helps the relationship. And,
Absolutely.
you know, it's come up many times when we've had issues in a district of our relationship with the Waukesha Police Department and how strong it is, and it's definitely a positive, and it goes both ways. The police learning about the students and the students learning about what the police do, so, yep.
Yeah, and I think to kind of dovetail on that, the fact that we have, or we've been told, that this is considered a highly sought-after role among those in law enforcement, and that they actually have to limit how long people can serve in order to give other deserving and well-qualified officers that opportunity, I think also says something really important about the relationship that we have with law enforcement in this district. And not just the value we get from it, but the value that they get from it as well. I think that it says a lot about the partnership we have between law enforcement, the district, and our students. All right, any other comments or questions? If not, I would entertain a motion for approval of policy 8407, school resource officer program.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Brooks. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, next on the agenda, we move to government relations discussion, information items. We do have an item around summer legislator visits. Dr. Siebert?
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Watt. Yes, we actually had our first one this afternoon. We had Representative Adam Nalen join us here at Blair, and Mrs. Voigt was able to join us, Mr. Wad, and Dr. Piasek. Had a great conversation, about an hour and a half long, I would say, and really nice. We have a nice rapport already with Representative Nalen because he's been with the School District of Waukesha for a period of time. But we also have some new legislators that we haven't met yet. So these are great opportunities to either further build the relationship or to begin the relationship. And just an opportunity to talk about the school district, talk about some of our financial successes, some of our academic successes and things we're striving for. Talk about some legislative concepts and ideas, exchange back and forth on those. And I just thought it was very enjoyable. And it's a good time, as Mr. Brooks pointed out last time, it's a good time to be doing those types of meetings now And so we have another one coming up Wednesday, June 19th with Representative Allen. And then we still are working on scheduling the remainder of them. So we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to invite all of you, and we notice those so that as many of the board members that want to come can come, and there's nothing to worry about. And like I said last time, we also understand that you have jobs and you have responsibilities, and so we're grateful when you can make it, and certainly understand when you can't. It's not a problem. So I'd certainly, though, welcome either Mr. Watt or Mrs. Voigt to talk about their views on what we did this afternoon.
Okay. I was very impressed. I had mentioned to Dr. Siebert when I first arrived, I really thought that the suggested legislative considerations were amazing. You know, like several of them, you know, were very positively received by the representative. You know, he's like, yeah, I could, you know, that sounds fair. You know, just very, very, very supportive of potentially helping us to make those kinds of things a reality.
Yep. And, you know, a couple of them that leap to mind that I think are important to call out that we talked with Representative Nalen about. First of all, was identifying ways to increase the amount of special ed funding that the district gets. I think he was very open to that, and he did acknowledge that there may be some work that needs to be done among some of his colleagues that are concerned about perhaps that being taken advantage of by districts to try to get more funding. And I think what he indicated was we need to help those representatives understand the process for how you know, students are identified as special needs and how that actually transpires and what the true financial impact is to districts of that not being funded at a higher level. So I'm trying to remember what some of the other things were we discussed, Dr. Siebert, that we asked him to possibly consider looking into that we thought were important.
Well, we talked about the school start date, and
Yep.
that seems to get some legs at times, as you know, Mr. Brooks, and then other times it doesn't. And so really a pretty unclear path on that, whether that will ever go anywhere or not, but I think it's worth continuing the dialogue. Certainly thanked him for his support of the low revenue ceiling increase in the last biennial budget, which allowed us to go from spending $10,206 a student up to $11,000, which was a significant bump, and we certainly thank our community for their support of that as well, and the board. But yeah, we also talked about common school funds and some flexibility that we might be able to have there. And then there's a few other pieces that we want to do a little more research on and a little more work to maybe flesh them out a little bit more. But I thought overall it was a nice opportunity for us to talk about some of those things, but also to really shine a light on the great things we have going on in the school district of Waukesha. And certainly he understood those and left with some deliverables that remind him of that.
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, and I can just say too, from personal experience working in Madison, having those relationships and having these important conversations when it comes to things like special ed funding, as Mr. Wad pointed out, when a representative is able to go back to their colleagues and say, you know, I was just talking with my school district, you know, they're really passionate about this, they're really expressing this concern. If you have that trust and that relationship build up, being able to go back to your colleagues and your peers and say, you know, this is what I'm hearing from my districts, that can go a long way in starting to get other people on board too. So I'm glad that we've gotten Representative Nealon here and that Representative Allen's coming next week, and hopefully we get more, because it's important. It's important feedback for them to hear, but it's also important as a school board who's advocating for things at the state level that will help out our students and our community. It's important that our voices are heard as well in the process.
Mr. Moore?
I want to say thank you all for those who were able to meet today. And you all got to meet with the actual representatives. I remember when we went to the day at the Capitol.
Yes.
We could not, I think it was like three or four of us board members went to Madison to go meet with them, and we were not even, you know, lucky to even meet with them. We had to meet with their assistants. And so that warms my heart that you all got to actually meet with them. and talk about issues directly with them. I mean, we talked about issues, but to their assistants, we couldn't, they were probably busy, those, state representatives and senators. But I'm so happy to hear that, and I look forward to, hearing about this more.
You bet.
Again, do apologize. I could not be there today at 1 p.m. during a work day.
No, we understand.
I do plan to hopefully be at the next one, so.
Ms. Voigt?
I just want to say that being able to talk to the assistants is a lot of times a very important part of the process. I recently met with a woman who was in that role, and we talked a lot about the many, many things that are part of that job description, that, you have the ear of the legislator, and you can summarize the multiple people that have a stand on a topic, one way or the other. That's not a bad thing, to have that relationship with a person that's in that role either.
I didn't take any offense.
Yeah. The one other thing that I would just note, aside from what you called out and the others here, and I think we were kind of having a lighthearted discussion about something around, the ability to do certain sorts of increases in funding or something, depending on whether or not you had passed a referendum recently or not. And, Representative Nayland pointed out, well, I kind of like your proposal, but I'm not sure the Pewaukee School District would be quite so. But the reminder in that was that, oftentimes, our representatives, have other school districts that may have, issues or ideas that are different from ours. And, as much as I often like to think that the ideas that we have here in the school district of Waukesha are the ones that everyone would want to adopt. That was an interesting reminder that isn't necessarily the case, and there may be times in which we find ourselves with competing priorities with our neighboring school districts on legislative initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's probably true in all areas, and Mr. Brooks would know this better than anybody. I think what's impressive about legislators is that they have to know not only about education, but they have to know about manufacturing, and they have to know about farming, and they have to know about a lot of different things. And so when we throw all this stuff at them, it's always good that we try to, do it in a kind way, and we explain a lot and give them a lot of background information, and try to help them learn, because it'd be like, us walking into a room. Like if I tried to learn all your banking pieces, right, I'd be
Right.
lost, right?
Yep.
But so it's just that I always appreciate them making the time to meet with us, and I think it's a mutually beneficial thing.
Right. Any other thoughts or comments? All right, well, looking forward to when Representative Allen is able to meet with us. I hope, if you're available, you take the opportunity to meet with him. I found today's session very, very beneficial. So, all right, moving on. Recommendations for future meetings. Anyone have any recommendations for items to be discussed or agendized for future meetings? All right, seeing none, I believe that brings us to the end of the agenda, and we are now adjourned. Thanks, everybody.